Thank you guys for coming out today. We really do appreciate you taking this time to come visit with us today. We're super excited to talk to you about the topic that we're going to cover today, which is the 5 pillars or the 5 key principles that a B2B really needs to think through if they're going to take their digital marketing to the next level. So I'm super excited to talk to you about that. As I look around the room, I do see a lot of friendly faces, people that are customers or friends on LinkedIn, and I'm glad you guys are here, but I also see a lot of new faces that I just met for the first time today. And so those of you that we're just meeting today probably don't know much about Vindy Social, so let me just give you a little bit on who we are. We're a full-service B2B digital agency, and our focus really is to help companies grow their businesses online. And one of the things that kind of sets us apart, other than the fact we've been doing this for a long time, over 19 years, is that we're very outcome-focused. In fact, one of the first things we do with a new client when they come on board is we work really hard with them to literally put the internet on a quota. So we've got kind of pass-fail. We know what winning looks like for them. And we'll talk more about why that's so important as we get later on in the presentation. Another thing, because we've been around for so long, we really have developed processes and systems and methods, game plans, whatever you want to call it, that really help a business-to-business company take their company to the next level in the world of digital. And in fact, we're going to walk you through some of those processes today as part of our presentation. So we're excited to talk to you about that. So before we get too far into it, I want to tell you a little story about the first time I bought my very first car. Now, did anybody ever buy a car in the 90s, like a brand new car? Show of hands. Okay, just a couple of people. As I look around the room, I think I see a lot of people that might have been born in the 90s, not buying cars in the 90s. Well, Beth and I got married in 1990. I bought my very first car, and here's how you bought cars in the 90s. You had a need, right? I need a new car. And so you'd get in your old car that you wanted to get rid of, and you'd drive around to the different dealerships around town, and you'd walk onto the parking lot of that dealership, and you'd start looking around at the different makes and models that were there. And as soon as you walked out onto the parking lot, what happened? You're connected with a sales guy, right? Like immediately. Now back then, that really wasn't a bad thing. I think car salesmen kind of get a bad rap, but back in the 90s, that was actually a very helpful thing because there was no access to really information about vehicles that you were buying. So you'd walk onto the lot, and the salesman would come up and you'd be looking at a car that you thought was interesting, and he'd tell you things about the car, he'd tell you how it stacks up with the other competitors, the other brands that were out there, and then you'd maybe test drive a car, and then you'd drive off to the next lot, the next dealership, and you'd do the same thing over and over again until you finally whittled it down and found a car that you liked, and then you'd go back to the dealership one more time and you'd negotiate your deal and you'd buy the car. Okay, that's how you did deals in the 90s. Well, I was a salesman in the 90s, and I worked for a large technology company, and believe it or not, that's exactly how you did deals in the 90s too. So I was a salesperson, and I sold hardware that went into data centers, and so my buyers were people that obviously needed things to go in their data center, and they didn't know what they needed to make their applications run faster or how to get better backups or whatever the case may be. And me being the sales guy, I was the source of that knowledge, and so they had to come to me to get information about how to solve their problems or accomplish what they were trying to accomplish. I also had a systems engineer that would make sure we configured things the right way, because if you left it up to a sales guy, he'd blow it up, right? But at the point I'm trying to make is, back then, the seller was very much in control of the process because they were the source of knowledge, okay? Now fast forward to last year when I bought my latest car, which was a Jeep Grand Cherokee. Now I have to be honest with you, I didn't buy it because my wife literally bought it for me. We've kind of learned after 29 years of marriage the strengths and weaknesses of each other. And I don't know if it's because I'm an old sales guy, but I am a terrible negotiator when it comes to buying cars. And so we've basically have given that role to my wife. In fact, little side story, this is when she finally took the reins away from me on this. About 15 years ago, I wanted to go look for a car. It was still kind of the 90s era, and I drove off in my car, and I said, hey, I'm just going to go look at cars because that's kind of what you did back then. But I literally came back with a new car, which I was not supposed to do. And it was a car that I wanted, and the salesman did a great job, and I did the deal, and I come home, and I know that Beth's gonna be mad at me because, I wasn't supposed to buy a car, but I did. And so I pull up, and she comes walking out, and I said, baby, it's okay, I got a really great deal. And she looked at me, and she just nailed me right away, because her first question was, what did you pay for it? And I said, I don't know. And I literally did not know what I paid for the car because they traded in my old car. They gave me like 2% interest, and it was just a great deal. And so ever since then, Beth hasn't let me buy a car. But this is how we buy cars now. So I got on the internet, this was last year. I started looking at, I wanted an SUV of a certain class, and I started checking out all the different websites and went to YouTube. I watched videos, I read reviews, and I settled on the Grand Cherokee. Then I went to the Jeep website, and I completely configured exactly what the color that I wanted, the type of moonroof that I wanted, the sound system that I wanted. And once I had that all figured out, I gave it to my wife. And she got on the internet and she started searching the inventory of all the dealerships in Dallas. And she found 3 dealerships that had this car, exactly the car that I wanted. And she started a bidding war with the 3 dealerships. And the first time we walked onto the parking lot of that dealership was the day we picked up the car. We were there for like 1 hour. And so something's happened in the world since the 90s to the 2019s, right? And what's happened? Well, shift has happened, right? And that's kind of the theme of my talk today. The power has shifted from the salesperson kind of being that source of knowledge to the buyer now being on a self-guided tour, right? Because we all have ubiquitous access to information and the buyers are doing the walking. And so that's kind of our challenge that we're having to deal with today. And I want to try to show you kind of visually what's going on. So one thing that's really clear is the process has not changed. We're still going from awareness, somebody doesn't know that you exist today, to now they know that you exist today, to consideration, really vetting out what's the best solution for their needs, to ultimately, are they going to buy from you or not? That hasn't changed. But what has changed is 85% of the process was in contact with a salesperson because they were the gatekeeper of knowledge. In today's world, according to Gartner, and this is mind-boggling when you think about it, the buyer is now 85% through the buying process before they pick up the phone and talk to a sales guy, okay? And most of that 85%, they're anonymous. You don't even know who they are. You don't even know that they're in market, okay? And so that's the big challenge. The salesperson only kind of handles, just like the salesperson in that example with the Cherokee, only handles kind of the last part of that overall process. But what can you imagine if we could take kind of the best of the old world and combine it with the new world by giving customers access to information and having dialogue and transferring of knowledge real time, and also just leveraging technology, systems, and processes to give the buyer exactly what they want when they want it. But how would we do that? Well, the reality is we have all the tools that we need today in order to accomplish that. But it does take a plan, and it does take sales and marketing alignment. Sales and marketing can no longer live in silos. Sales and marketing has to work together if we're going to be successful. And that's really gets me to our topic of today. I call these the 5 pillars of B2B digital marketing. These are really the 5 things that every business-to-business company really needs to think through if they're going to take their digital marketing to the next level. And if you'll notice, before we even get to the 5 pillars, we've got some foundational things that we really need to think through as well. And so what we're going to do in our time together today is basically walk through this process. And by the way, this is a very similar process that we walked all of our new clients through to really help them understand what they're trying to do with their business. And so the first step that we've got to look at, which is truly the foundational step, is where are we growing? You know, we call it the wow at Vindy. You know, why do you exist as a business, and where are you trying to go as a business? That's step 1. And you know what's amazing, when I talk to many clients and I say, hey, why do you exist? Where are you trying to go? Sometimes I get that deer in headlights, like, I don't know, that's a really good question. We should probably think about that. But once we kind of have that discussion with them, we're then able to really start focusing on, you know, beginning with the end in mind and really understanding, where are you trying to go? What is your revenue goal for next year? And of that revenue goal, what percentage of that revenue is going to come from net new customers? And of that percentage of revenue that's going to come from net new customers, what percentage do we want digital to contribute to that? And then once we figure that out and understand what an average customer brings to the business, we can literally back into, you know, how many opportunities does digital need to create? How many sales qualified leads does digital need to create? How many marketing qualified leads do we need? And ultimately, how much traffic? And we can build a model from the ground up or bottom up that really accomplishes their goals. But you can't do anything else in digital without taking time and focusing on that first. So once we've got the where are we growing, then we can move into, who is our customer? And this is really critical today because the internet has created a wonderful opportunity for all of us to niche ourselves, right? We don't have to be everything to everybody. One of the things I said at the very beginning of this presentation is that we are a full service B2B digital agency. I didn't say we are a full service agency, right? We work with B2Bs. And the wonderful thing about today's world is there is a niche out there for every business. And the more you talk about your niche and the more that you communicate your uniqueness, that wasn't easy to say. Once you figure that out, you can actually really address that audience in a way that's more unique than what your competition is doing. And so once you figure out what makes you different, that's something you need to be shouting from the rooftops of your business. And what's key to that is really developing personas. Personas are critical to your success today. When we work with new clients, one of the first things that we do after we kind of figure out where they're trying to go is who are these key personas and what are the things that keep them awake at night? And in most businesses, there's 3 critical personas. One persona is the C-suite. So this is the guy that's really concerned about how you're going to help him make his number, whether that's a revenue number or a profit number or whatever. But you've got to build a persona around that C-suite guy. Probably not the person your sales reps are going to spend the most of the time with, but certainly somebody that you've got a message to. The next level down is the manager. And in most cases, this is the person that your sales guys are mostly working with. But this is the guy that's going to have to basically integrate your solution, whatever that may be, right? He's the guy that's going to be concerned about how disruptive is this going to be? How long is it going to take? Is it going to keep me from being successful in my ladder climbing? But we need to build a persona around that. And then the third persona is what we call the knowledge worker. This is the guy that's got to live with whatever it is that you've provided to the business, right? He's the one that's going to be pulling the levers and making the donuts. And that's an influencer in the B2B world. And so we need to think about that guy, the guy that's going to live with your solution, and how do you message to him as part of that overall sales process. Now, companies that are integrating personas today and doing it well are having 90% success in achieving their revenue goals and their lead goals. And I'll tell you, I talked to a lot of B2Bs out there today that are struggling getting a 90% success rate. And so if you're not doing personas, that's a good step in the right direction. So let's move on to the next step, which is really understanding what winning looks like. And this is a very close cousin to the foundational step, which is the wow, trying to figure out where you're trying to go. But now let's literally put the internet on a quota for your business. And so every new client that we go with, we literally get to agreement with them where we document this is, how many leads, how many sales, how many MQLs, SQLs do we need to produce in order to hit our goal. And then we break that down by quarter. So each quarter, we're literally looking at a forecast that says, for us to hit our top line goals, digital needs to produce this many outcomes. And then we also break it down all the way to leading and lagging indicators, because in the B2B world, sales cycles tend to be pretty long. And so we need to be able to look at leading indicators, which are things that are showing us that we're heading in the right direction. Those might be things like impressions or clicks to our website or whatever the case may be. But before you move on to the fundamental pillars that we're about to go through, you've got to go through this exercise. You cannot effectively manage and optimize without having KPIs. It would be kind of like taking a bow and arrow and shooting it in the air and then grabbing a target and running around trying to catch that arrow with the target, right? It's much better to have a target and say, this is where we're trying to go, and then shoot for it. Because then you have the ability to do what we call management by exception, which is these are our goals. This is what we were hoping to achieve. These are the tactics that we're going to use to try to achieve those goals. And some of those tactics we're going to do well, and some of those tactics are going to underperform. But now we can focus our energy on, okay, why did these tactics not do well? Was it messaging? Was it audience? Was it a bad tactic? Without having KPIs, you have no visibility in order to do that. And so you have to begin with the end in mind and really document these things. And Mario, who's one of our clients here, we were going through this exercise last week. We literally were like, hey, we don't know yet, but let's at least put some baseline KPIs in place that we can use to measure, and then we can tweak those KPIs over time, and that's certainly fine as well.